Scotland, in line with the Lerwick Declaration.
Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by Nicola Sturgeon on the Independence White Paper. The Deputy First Minister will take questions at the end of her statement, and there should therefore be no interventions or interruptions. I call on Nicola Sturgeon. Deputy First Minister, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With your permission, I would like to make a statement on Scotland's future, the Scottish Government's comprehensive guide to an independent Scotland, which was published earlier today and made available to all members from 10 o'clock this morning. Scotland's future runs to 670 pages and 170,000 words. It is the most detailed prospectus for the independence of a country that has ever been published. The Government promised the people of Scotland, and indeed this Parliament, detailed proposals for independence, the opportunities of independence, the benefits for individuals, families, communities and our nation as a whole, and the practicalities of how we move from a yes vote in September next year to becoming an independent country in March 2016. Scotland's future provides all of this detail and more. I realise that members will need time to read and digest the contents of this landmark document. The Government has therefore made time for a full debate tomorrow afternoon, and I am sure that there will be many opportunities to discuss and debate the detail of it, both here in Parliament and across the country, in the months leading up to the referendum. Today, Presiding Officer, I want to set out the key themes of Scotland's future and provide information on how the Government intends to raise awareness of it and ensure that the public knows how to access the guide and the detailed information that it contains. As members will be aware, the guide is in 5 parts. Part 1 gives an overview of the compelling case for independence and describes what our newly independent Scotland will look like. Part 2 sets out the financial strengths of our country, forecasts Scotland's fiscal position at the point of independence and makes clear how this Government, if elected in 2016 to be the first government of an independent Scotland, would deliver our early priorities within sound public finances. Part 3 details the benefits and opportunities of independence across the entire range of government responsibilities that will transfer from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament in the event of a yes vote, and illustrates through a set of Scottish Government policy choices how we can start to use the new powers of independence to grow our economy and tackle the inequality that is so unacceptable in our rich country. Part 4 describes how we will become independent, the negotiations, agreements and preparations that will be required in the transition period between a yes vote next year and Independence Day on the 24th of March 2016. It also considers the opportunity that independence will give us to develop a modern, written constitution fit for the 21st century. And finally, Part 5 provides a comprehensive set of answers, 650 in all, to the range of questions that we have been asked about the benefits and practicalities of independence. Presiding Officer, I will now talk about the contents of each of these parts in more detail. The case for independence that is set out in Part 1 rests on 3 key pillars: democracy, prosperity and social justice. The Scottish Government wants Scotland to become an independent country because we believe that decisions about Scotland should be taken by the people who care most about the future of Scotland, those of us who live and work here. It is better and right that decisions are made here in our democratically elected Parliament and not by Westminster governments that are very often in government despite having lost the election in Scotland. That is the democratic case for independence. We want Scotland to become independent because we believe that access to our own vast resources and the ability to take decisions that will grow our economy faster are essential to put our economy and our public finances on a strong and sustainable footing and ensure that our country can reach its full potential. That is the economic case for independence. And we want Scotland to become independent because we believe that being part of one of the most unequal countries in the developed world is simply not acceptable, and that with independence we can choose to do things differently. We can ensure that our children get the best possible start in life and that we have public services to be proud of. We can ensure that the incomes of the lowest paid keep pace with the cost of living, and we can design a system of social protection that invests in the potential of people, one that supports people into work, but provides a decent safety net for those who can't. That, Presiding Officer, is the social justice case for independence. Part 1 of Scotland's Future also sets out some of the very real consequences for Scotland if there is a no vote in the referendum. The fact is, there will be no guarantee whatsoever of any more powers for our Parliament. There will be a real threat to Scotland's budget from the review of the Barnett formula that senior politicians in all UK parties now seem to favour, and there will be a real and present risk that Scotland could be taken out of the European Union against our will. These are the real consequences of voting no in the referendum next year. Part 2 of this document on our national finances demonstrates that we are a wealthy and productive country. With independence, we would be the 8th richest country in the OECD in terms of output per head of population and the 10th richest country in terms of income per head. We more than pay our way. For every one of the last 30 years, whether oil prices have been high or oil prices have been low, estimates show that we have generated more tax per head than the UK as a whole. Our financial foundations, Presiding Officer, are solid. Even with a population share of UK debt, our debt to GDP ratio is projected to be lower than the UK's. So our starting point is a strong one. But the starting point is just that, a starting point. The real benefit of independence is the ability it gives us to shape our own future. Beyond 2016, our future prosperity will depend on the decisions we make as a nation. And that is the whole point of independence. We will have the chance to make different and better decisions for Scotland. We will not simply continue with the same old Westminster policies that have failed us in the past and will fail us again in the future. Instead, we can take the action that is needed to grow our economy and ensure that we have a growing, healthy and skilled population. Part 3, Presiding Officer, sets out exactly how we can start to do this. It provides a comprehensive analysis of the benefits that independence will bring across the entire range of policy areas and sets out just some of the ways in which this government would use the new powers of independence. I will highlight here just a few. Firstly, with control of our own resources, we could embark on a transformational expansion of childcare. It is our aim that all children from age 1 to when they enter school will have access to a guaranteed 30 hours of childcare per week for 38 weeks of the year, the same number of hours as children spend at primary school. By the end of the first term, we intend to have delivered this policy for all 3- and 4-year-olds and vulnerable 2-year-olds. This policy will provide our children with the best start in life. It will enable many more women to join the workforce to fulfil their potential, provide for their families and contribute tax revenue to our economy. And, Presiding Officer, it will create 35,000 new jobs. Presiding Officer, independence allows us to ensure that the economic benefits from increased growth and therefore increased tax revenues will stay in Scotland rather than flow straight to the Westminster Treasury. Presiding Officer, that is why we need independence to successfully deliver this groundbreaking policy. Secondly, we would call a halt to the damaging Westminster policies that are pushing so many people into poverty. We would abolish the bedroom tax within a year of the first election for the first independent Parliament. And we would choose not to proceed with the rollout of universal credit and personal independence payments. These programmes are mired in controversy and delay, and they will cause misery to some of our most vulnerable citizens. Independence will give us the chance, informed by the ongoing work of our expert group on welfare, to build a fair and efficient social protection system that is fit for purpose. And thirdly, Presiding Officer, because we know that a fair society needs a strong economy, we will ensure that our business taxes are competitive and support growth. We will do this as part of an industrial and economic policy to grow our economy, boost jobs and increase participation in the workforce. This paper contains many other detailed proposals for an independent Scotland. the advantages for our farmers and fishing communities, for broadcasting, for our transport connections and for our universities. It sets out exactly how we will effect the transition from being a member of the EU as part of the UK to being a fully independent member with a seat at the top table and the ability to protect our vital national interests. It sets out how the governance of our nation would be underpinned by a written constitution to protect our freedom and our rights. It describes in detail the arrangements we will put in place to secure and defend our nation. And it sets out our clear aim that during the first parliamentary term of an independent Scotland, nuclear weapons of mass destruction will be removed from our country once and for all. Presiding Officer, these are just some of the benefits of Scotland becoming an independent country. And Part 4 sets out how we will make the transition from a yes vote in the referendum to becoming that independent country in March 2016. It describes the preparations and the legal processes that will be required and the range of negotiations that we will have with Westminster, the European Union and other international partners. These negotiations will include arrangements for the Sterling area, the equitable division of assets and liabilities, the seamless delivery of public services across Scotland and the rest of the UK, and our continued membership of the EU and other international organisations. On all of these, we set out reasonable, rational and common-sense proposals that are in the interests of Scotland and in the interests of the rest of the UK. And finally, Presiding Officer, Part 5 answers the range of questions that have been asked of us in recent months. This extensive and detailed Q&A, which is fully searchable online, will be a valuable resource for everyone in Scotland, indeed for everyone in this Scottish Parliament. Presiding Officer, this Guide to Independence is intended for the public. We want as many people as possible to read it. So let me turn now to what we will do to ensure that everyone in Scotland has the opportunity to read it. This guide has an initial print run of 20,000 copies, but it will be made available to everyone who requests a copy. It has been designed to be as accessible and reader-friendly as possible. A summary document is also available in print and online. A fully searchable document is available at www.scotreferendum.com, and reference copies will be available in local libraries. An e-book version is available on the Scot Referendum website and from the iTunes Store and Amazon. Anyone who wants a hard copy can request one by emailing referendum white paper at scotland.gsi.gov.uk, or they can phone 0300 012 1809. Copies for individuals in the UK will be free, while bulk and overseas orders will attract a charge of £10 plus postage and packaging. A public information campaign will be launched later this week using radio, press and outdoor advertising, and an information postcard will be sent to every household advising people how they can access the guide. The total cost of the public information campaign will be £450,000. A final figure for the printing of the document itself will not be available until we know what the final demand for hard copies turns out to be, but I will, of course, update Parliament further on that in due course. In the 1997 devolution referendum, alongside publication of the White Paper, a leaflet was posted to every household and a promotional video was produced by the then Scottish Office. There is therefore a clear precedent for public information activity on the scale proposed. Presiding Officer, we face a historic year in Scotland. Two key dates are now firmly established: the 18th of September 2014, when we choose our future, and the 24th of March 2016, when we will, I believe, become an independent country. I believe that with its comprehensive set of answers about the practicalities of independence and its detailed proposals on the benefits of independence, Scotland's future will now be the document that drives this debate. It sets out the vision and the detailed plan. There is simply no equivalent on the no side. With Scotland's future providing the positive case for a yes vote, the absence of detail and vision from the no side will no longer be enough. Today's publication changes the dynamic of this debate. The challenge is now for those who oppose independence to move beyond project fear and give us their vision for Scotland's future and to answer the important questions about what happens to Scotland if we don't vote yes. Presiding Officer, our message to the people of Scotland is this. Take the opportunity to read Scotland's future. Consider the positive opportunities that independence offers our country. Compare and contrast it with the relentless negativity of the other side and make up your own mind. Presiding Officer, as of today, Scotland's future really is in Scotland's hands.
Thank you. Order. Order. Deputy First Minister will now take questions. I intend to allow 30 minutes for questions, after which we move on to the next item of business. It would be helpful if members wish to ask a question were to press the request to speak button now. Joanne Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, what we have today doesn't mark the beginning of the end of the United Kingdom, but perhaps it marks the beginning of the end of the Yes campaign. 670 pages, yes, but 670 pages of assertion and uncertainty amplified by a statement from the Deputy First Minister, which was a full exercise in assertion without evidence. So still no guarantee on the currency. The much vaunted legal opinion on our EU membership noticeable only by its absence. And the headline offer, another promise on childcare which the Scottish Government could deliver now, but refuses to do so. Children denied the chance of proper care until their parents vote the way the SNP want them to. How cynical is that? Now, beyond today's events, the fundamental questions remain unanswered. Does the Deputy First Minister not accept that she cannot guarantee Scots what currency they would have for their wages, their mortgages, their pensions and their savings? That she cannot guarantee that because her plan is to rely on the goodwill of the rest of the United Kingdom, the same people,
Order.
It requires her to rely on the goodwill of the rest of the United Kingdom, the same people she claims are doing us down, and it's why we need to leave the United Kingdom in the first place. But of course, the Deputy First Minister says that if Scotland isn't allowed to keep the pound, we shall simply default on our debts. The reality is this. The SNP are asking for a divorce, but they want to keep the joint bank account. So, is Plan B simply to do a runner?
Deputy First Minister. Order. Order.
It's good to know that
Deputy First Minister.
It's good to know that on this important day for Scotland, Joanne Lamont is her usual cheery self. Certainly one thing that is certain, one thing that is absolutely certain in this referendum debate is that whenever she gets the opportunity, Joanne Lamont manages to strike entirely the wrong tone and note. It doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't surprise me to hear Joanne Lamont's questions. I could have written Joanne Lamont's script at any time over the past few weeks. There was an article in the Spectator magazine a couple of weeks ago saying that they had already seen the no side's rebuttal to the white paper before it was even published. So we know what the no side will say. It's hardly a surprise you're trying to persuade people to vote no. Let me take the two substantive issues that Joanne Lamont raised. On the European Union, we set out here a clear, reasonable and rational position fully consistent with our legal advice that shows how Scotland will make the transition to being a member of the EU as part of the UK, to being an independent member of the EU, able to properly represent our national interests. And you know something? The only risk that exists right now to Scotland's membership of the European Union is the in-out referendum offered by David Cameron that risks taking us out of the European Union against our will. And on currency, let me make it very clear to Joanne Lamont, in case she has missed it, Scotland will continue to use the pound, that pound that is much ours as it is the rest of the UK's. And that position is not just put forward as a reasonable and rational position in the interests of Scotland, it is put forward because it is a reasonable and rational position in the interests of the rest of the UK as well, for three reasons. Firstly, our trading relationship. Scotland is the rest of the UK's second biggest export market. They export 60 billion of goods into Scotland. It would make no sense for a Westminster government to force its own businesses into a different currency. And secondly, our massive contribution to the UK's balance of payments. If we take our 40 billion of oil and gas exports out of the UK's balance of payments, it leaves rather a big hole that would be extremely damaging to a sterling currency. And thirdly, the point that Joanne Lamont alluded to. I'm not making any threats. I'll leave that to the other side of this campaign. I'm simply making the point that in any sensible negotiation, we talk about assets and liabilities. I think Scotland should take a fair share of liabilities of the UK, but I also think we should get a fair share of assets, and you don't have one without the other.
Ruth Davidson. Order.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The people of Scotland have been waiting a long time to get answers on what independence might look like. And I think people right across the country will have looked at the launch of this white paper today and have thought, is this it? Is this why we should break apart a United Kingdom that Scotland has spent 300 years helping to build? Is this why we should sacrifice one half of our shared nationhood, our dual identity? Is this why we should walk away? And the truth is, there was very little new that we hadn't heard here before. Little except that pledge on childcare. Now, for 6 years, the Deputy First Minister has sat in a Scottish Government with full powers over childcare. And for 6 years, the Scottish Conservatives, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have been urging her government to give more help with childcare to Scottish families. And now, suddenly, after 6 years, we get this promise. And it was illuminating, Presiding Officer. It was illuminating that when the Deputy First Minister was asked this morning why, in 6 years, she had not helped families in this way when she had the powers to do so, she answered that she hadn't helped when she could because the tax receipts of women going back to work would have gone to the UK Treasury. Now, if the Deputy First Minister wants to prove that this pledge isn't retail politics, it isn't jotted down on the back of a fag packet, can she tell us how much this policy would cost? How much per year 1,140 hours of childcare for all children from age 1 to school will cost, and why is the costing not in the document?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I say firstly to Ruth Davidson that I'll be happy to allow the people of Scotland to judge this document. That's why we are taking great pains to make sure that everybody has access to a copy. I said in my statement, our message is read the document and make up your own minds. The question for the other side of the debate is where is your equivalent? We now have the case for independence. Where is the case for the no proposition? On the specific issue of childcare, I think it's quite interesting that Ruth Davidson comes to this chamber and completely distorts a quote that I gave on the radio this morning. But anyway, we'll put that to one side. The fact of the matter is this government has been increasing childcare provision all through the time we have been in government, and we're continuing to do it right now. But if we want to make not just incremental increases, but make a transformational change in the provision of childcare, then we do need to access the increased revenues that flow from that policy. If we were able, just as an example, to bring our levels of female participation in the workforce to the level of, say, Sweden, a comparable independent country, we'd have increased tax revenues in the region of £700 million every year. That's the kind of revenue that then funds that policy. That's the reason you need independent to do this. And if Ruth Davidson had been watching, as I'm sure she was, the live stream of the launch this morning, should have heard me give the answers to the question about costing. Part 2 of this document sets out how we will deliver our priorities within sound public finances. £100 million within our first budget for phase 1, £600 million by the time we get to the end of that first Parliament. And by then, we see these increased revenues from having more women able to participate in the workforce. It's the kind of ambitious, transformational, life-changing policy that independence gives us the ability to do. And if the opposition would raise their sights and raise their ambition, they might find it within themselves to support it.
Order. Can I advise members that I have 20 members who wish to ask a question? It is unlikely I'm going to get through everybody, but if the questions are brief and the answers are brief, then we might make considerable progress. Can I remind members we are having a debate tomorrow, so can you keep the questions as questions and answers as brief as possible? Thank you. Can I now call Bruce Crawford?
Presiding Officer, the thing that excites me most about independence is the opportunity to make transformational changes to both our society and our economy. That's why I welcome so much the commitment in regard to childcare in Scotland's future. And can the Deputy First Minister provide more detail about how, with independence, we can transform childcare provision in Scotland, and explain to the doomsayers in the Better Together campaign how this policy will not only help Scottish families, but help the Scottish economy and create jobs to boot?
Deputy First Minister.
Bruce Crawford, I think, asks an excellent question, because he highlights exactly what people out there want to hear and want to know. They want to know what the benefits of independence are to them, to their families, to their communities. And this childcare proposal is one that would benefit families the length and breadth of this country. It would give our youngest people, our children, the best start in life, but it would give parents, in particular women, the opportunities that many of them are priced out of just now because of the prohibitive costs of childcare, the opportunity to participate in the workforce. And it would grow the economy and increase revenues as well, allowing us to make that policy affordable and sustainable. And incidentally, into the bargain, the fact of delivering this kind of transformational childcare policy would create 35,000 new jobs, the people needed to look after the children. This is the kind of ambitious policy that I believe will galvanise this campaign and be at the heart of the debate as we move forward towards the referendum.
Bruce Smith, followed by Linda Fabiani.
Thank you very much. Presiding Officer, does the Deputy First Minister accept that the people of England, Wales and Northern Ireland have a right to say no to a Eurozone-style currency union? And is she listening and is she hearing the many voices from England, Wales and Northern Ireland who are saying that it is seriously unlikely?
Deputy First Minister.
No, I hear no politicians say that, because they are in a campaign trying to persuade people to vote no, so it hardly comes as a surprise. I mean, can I say to Drew Scott, we're not talking about a Eurozone-style shared currency. Scotland and the rest of the UK has been described by a range of eminent experts as an optimal currency zone, unlike the Eurozone, where the richest parts of Germany and the poorest parts of Greece are coexisting within a currency. But the reasons why I believe this is the right policy, as I've already said, are not just because it's in the best interests of Scotland, but because it's in the best interests of people in other parts of the UK. And perhaps those on the other side of the argument would care to take the time to explain why on earth a Westminster government would want to say to its own businesses that export into Scotland, no, Scotland wants to stay in a currency with you, but we're going to force you into the transaction costs, the lost jobs that would come from having a separate currency. Why would a Westminster government want to put to one side and take out of its balance of payments the £40 billion that flow from our oil and gas exports? This is a sensible, common sense, rational, reasonable proposition. That's perhaps why the No campaign don't recognise it.
Linda Fabiani, followed by Willie Rennie.
What's that mean?
Fabiani.
Sorry, Presiding Officer, I found it difficult to hear there. As we know, Presiding Officer, UK civil service jobs continue to be cut by Westminster, in contrast to the Scottish Government's policy here of no compulsory redundancies. This does affect the East Kilbride constituency, so may I ask the Deputy First Minister what Scotland's future says about improving job security?
Deputy First Minister.
Can I refer Linda Fabiani to two particular parts of the White Paper, page 365 and part 4 of the White Paper, which detail some of the workforce issues in terms of the transfer of civil service and public service employees from UK Government employment into Scottish Government employment, where they would, for example, get the benefit of the no compulsory redundancy policy that we have, but the UK Government doesn't have. And secondly, she might with our constituency responsibilities, be interested in page 49 of the document, which is in part 1, where it makes clear that Scotland's military HQ would be at Faslane, but with delivery functions in East Kilbride. I'm sure she'll find that of interest.
Will Rennie, followed by Graham Pearson.
I like optimism as much as the Deputy First Minister, but she must be the only person on the planet who believes that there is not one single downside to independence worth mentioning in the White Paper, and that dozens of other countries and organisations will agree to every single demand of hers on the currency, on NATO, on the EU and so much more. Yet, if she is wrong, this is the gamble she is taking, and it's the gamble that Scotland will pay the price for. One area in which she is definitely wrong is on childcare. The Scottish Government has the worst childcare arrangements in the British Isles, and yet the Deputy First Minister has said that she is delaying the introduction of early education for 2-year-olds until after the referendum, even though it has already been delivered with the powers in England. She has the powers now. Why the delay?
Deputy First Minister.
Firstly, can I say to Willie Rennie, in response to the first part of his question, we, like every other country in the world, live in a world that is at times difficult, challenging and uncertain. But I happen to believe that just as this is true for every other independent country in the world, in that uncertain world, it is always better to be in the driving seat of your own destiny than leave the decisions to be taken elsewhere. So that's why I believe that in any circumstances it is better to be independent. Secondly, on the currency union, there were two words I forgot to use in describing a currency union. Those two words were logical and desirable. These aren't actually my words. These are the words of Alistair Darling when he was telling the truth about it before the No campaign got hold of him and made him change his tune. And in respect of childcare, Willie Rennie is just wrong about the Scottish Government's childcare position. I seem to recall it was his UK leader, Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK Government, that at one point was forced to speak out against the childcare policy of his own government. We are making progressive changes to the provision of childcare, but we want to transform the provision of childcare. And if Willie Rennie has been listening to this session so far, as I'm sure he has, he will know why we need the powers of independence to do that, so that we can provide that policy, grow revenues and allow those revenues to make that policy sustainable and affordable. I believe this is the policy that will capture the imagination of people around Scotland, and Willie Rennie, given his creditable track record on this issue, I think would be better advised to get behind it.
Graham Pearson, followed by Aileen MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the Deputy First Minister tell us what discussions she has had with her opposite numbers at Westminster in relation to the delivery of national security? The document indicates government's first responsibility to reflect MI5, MI6, GCHQ and national cyber threats with her security and intelligence agency and give us confidence of her costings.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I know Graham Pearson, with his interest and his expertise on these issues, will be interested to read the document from page 261 onwards, which sets out the proposals around security and intelligence, including the establishment of a new security and intelligence agency. On the issue of discussions with Westminster counterparts, I'm glad he raised this issue, because I've said repeatedly, and I'll say again today, that I would welcome discussions with UK counterparts about how we do take forward negotiations in the event of a yes vote next year. Now, I'm not expecting we pre-negotiate the entire independence settlement, but it would be in everybody's interest for us to have sensible discussions. The position of the Westminster Government is that they're not prepared to have those discussions. So if Graham Pearson wants to take the matter up with the Westminster Government and encourage them to change their tune, then I'd be very happy for him to do so. And I, the Government and an entire civil service are at their disposal to sit down and talk about these issues any time they like.
Aileen MacLeod, followed by Jackie Baillie.
Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that at a time when the UK Government is seriously contemplating UK withdrawal from the EU, that Scotland's future inside the EU can only be guaranteed by independence, and that under any scenario, an independent Scottish Government taking its place at the EU top table is the only way of ensuring that Scotland's best interests are represented in EU legislative and policy decisions?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I'll make 2 points in response to Aileen's question, which I think is an absolutely vital question in terms of Scotland's representation within the European Union. Firstly, our interests would be much better served by independent membership of the European Union. And anybody who doubts that would only need to speak to Richard Lockhead, I'm not sure if he's in the chamber just now, about the disgraceful situation around agriculture payments over the last few weeks when Scotland's interests were not served by the UK Government. And the second point is absolutely the correct one. The risk to Scotland's membership of the European Union is not independence. The risk is the in-out referendum being proposed by David Cameron and the Conservatives and the UK Government. That is the risk. If Scotland doesn't become independent, then there is a very real risk that in that referendum, the UK as a whole votes to come out, Scotland votes to stay in, and we get taken out of the European Union against our will, with all of the serious implications for our economy. That's the risk to Scotland, and that's one of the many reasons we should vote yes in the referendum.
Jackie Baillie, followed by Stuart Maxwell.
The Deputy First Minister will know that pensions make up about 40% of the social security budget, but not one word about pensions in the statement. Is it because she has no answers? No answers on how cross-border pension schemes will be funded? No answer to the fact that pensions will cost more in Scotland due to the population ageing faster? And no answer to the cost of pensions overall? Isn't it the case that the Office for National Statistics, the National Records of Scotland, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the Scottish Government's own Fiscal Commission and even John Swinney acknowledged that maintaining pensions in an independent Scotland would present a huge problem? Isn't it true that the pensioners in Scotland do face a stark choice? They can either believe the facts from experts or believe the assertions from the SNP.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I know it's only been a few hours since the document was published, and Jackie Baillie may not have had time to read it yet, but I would recommend to her pages 138 onwards, which sets out in detail the position around pensions. Let me give her just some highlights. Current pensioners will receive their pensions as now, on time and in full. Accrued rights will be honoured and protected. Planned reform, single-tier pension will be rolled out. This triple lock will be guaranteed for the first term of an independent parliament. No such guarantee currently exists from Westminster. Let me make a couple of other points about pensions. Right now, we pay a smaller proportion of our GDP on social protection, including things like pensions, than is the case in the UK as a whole. So we start from a stronger, more affordable position. We have an ageing population. We're not unique in that, and actually it's a good thing. It's something we should celebrate, not moan about. Now, you can argue about whether our population, our ageing population, is a more acute problem for Scotland than in other countries. Actually, the proportion of our population over pension age is increasing slightly lower than the UK. If you look at our dependency ratio, if you take the whole dependency ratio, it's better. If you look at the dependency ratio just for pensioners, it's slightly worse. But the key point is this. The key point is this. What do we do about it? The way you deal with an ageing population, the way you support an ageing population, is to grow your working age population. How do you do that? You attract immigration rather than the UK Government's policies to try to, for example, get rid of the post-study visa. You take measures to grow your economy, to create jobs, to grow tax revenues. That's how you deal with and support an ageing population, and we're far better able to do it with independence than we will be as part of the Union.
Stuart Maxwell, followed by Ian Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that one of the biggest gains of independence is a social security system that is in line with the wishes of the people of Scotland? And can the Deputy First Minister outline what measures are set out in the White Paper to achieve this fair and prosperous future?
Deputy First Minister.
I can thank the member for that question and refer him to Part 3, Chapter 4, where our proposals on welfare and social protection are set out. I do agree that the Westminster assault on our welfare state is one of the many reasons for supporting independence. Our welfare state, cherished by all of us, is being dismantled by the Westminster Government before our very eyes. And if we want to protect it, then the best way to protect it is to vote yes. We set out some very clear policies in this White Paper. We will abolish the bedroom tax within the first year of being elected as the first government of an independent Scotland. We will take the decision not to proceed with universal credit and personal independence payments. These are programmes mired in controversy, delayed and seriously damaging to some of the most vulnerable in our society. And we will build on the work being done by the expert group in welfare to make sure we can design a social protection system that is fit for Scotland's purposes, that helps people into work but provides the decent safety net for those who can't, that I believe we all want to see.
Ian Gray, followed by Annabel Goldie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On page 305 of the White Paper, it says that the Scottish Government would look to establish an oil fund immediately on independence to stabilise the economy. What it doesn't say is where the money for that fund will come from. So will it come from... No, it doesn't.
Order! Order! Let us hear the member. Order.
I think you'll find it doesn't say where the money for that fund will come from. So the question is, will it come from increased taxation? Will it come from cuts in public spending? Or do they seriously propose, as is rather implied, do they seriously propose to borrow the money to save in an oil fund in the world's biggest payday loan? Surely that's not the common sense so beloved of the Deputy First Minister.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I would point out to Ian Gray that Norway established its oil fund some years before it started paying into the oil fund. In case he's forgotten this fact, Norway, independent Norway, now has an oil fund of £450 billion. That's one of the very big benefits of being independent. Now, in relation to Ian Gray's questions, the thing is, Ian Gray knows the answer to these questions, because I'm sure, being the careful, prepared person that he is, that he's read the Fiscal Commission's work on the oil fund. It proposes an oil fund with two purposes. One, to smooth the volatility of oil revenues. We would make a cautious forecast of oil revenues, and when the actual revenues exceed that, we would put the excess into an oil fund. And secondly, we would have an oil fund with the purpose of saving for future generations, something that Westminster governments over generations have failed to do, and we would start paying into that when the deficit reached a point below 3%. That is very, very clear. But you know, the key thing here is this: if we leave Westminster in charge, then the next however many years of our oil revenues will be squandered in the same way as the last 40 years have been squandered. If we are independent, we can steward them for the future. Yet another reason to vote yes and become independent.
Annabel Goldie, followed by Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whatever Alex Salmond says, an independent Scotland using the pound is not under his control. It will be under the control of a foreign country. Now, the White Paper at page 111 concedes the possibility of, and I quote, a different arrangement. If the currency negotiations to use the pound fail, can the Deputy First Minister please clarify what is the different arrangement? Is it the euro, the groat, the Aberdeen dollar? What is Plan B?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the point Annabel Goldie draws attention to about different arrangements simply acknowledges the fact that in future in an independent Scotland, some parties, I see Patrick Harvey here in the chamber, might take a different view on the best currency arrangement for Scotland. I know that Willie Rennie's party, as recently as the 2010 general election, had entry to the euro still as their preferred currency option. So clearly there are differences of opinion in the No campaign on what the best currency option is. Our view, our firm view, is that a shared currency is in the best interests of Scotland and in the best interests of the UK. And I would have thought Annabel Goldie, whose party gave Alistair Darling such a warm standing ovation when he came to their conference, would agree with Alistair Darling that it's both logical and desirable.
Patricia Ferguson, followed by Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Deputy First Minister advise the Chamber what discussions have taken place with EU member states to back up the statement that in order to ensure the current UK obligations and provisions apply to independent Scotland, the, I quote, necessary treaty amendments will be taken forward with the agreement of member states? In the event that the consent of EU member states has not already been obtained, does she agree that it would be more honest for the document to explore what concessions might have to be made in order to secure EU membership? And can she indicate to the Chamber which of the UK opt-outs she would be prepared to concede in order to ensure Scotland's membership?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I say to Patricia Ferguson, we have discussions with different EU members on a range of issues on a range of different occasions. Fiona Hislop will be briefing the Consular Corps, for example, over the next couple of days on the content of the White Paper. She will be as aware as I am that no other European member state would want to be seen to see anything that could be deemed to be interfering in the domestic debate that Scotland is having. We have, and this goes back to an answer I gave earlier on, we would be very happy to sit down and discuss these matters with the European Commission. The Commission has made clear those discussions would have to be initiated by the member state, which is the UK, and we're back to the point the UK, for reasons best known to itself, doesn't want to discuss these issues, perhaps because they know that the position of the Scottish Government is a sound one. But, you know, the question that the No campaign has to answer is why on earth would any member of the European Union not want Scotland to continue in membership? Scotland is a contributor to the European Union in many, many different ways, and it would be in the interests of Scotland and other EU members that that continued. And in terms of her question about opt-outs, and I'm sure she will, if she hasn't already, read the detail of this in the White Paper, we're arguing for a transition on the basis of continuity of effect. We're not asking for special arrangements to apply to Scotland. We're arguing for the same arrangements that apply to us now as part of the UK to continue when we are an independent country. Again, that is a reasonable and sensible position, as are all the positions laid out in this comprehensive document published today.
Annabel Ewing, followed by Patrick Harvie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Deputy First Minister what analysis is carried out in the White Paper as to the opportunities of independence to reverse the trend of widening inequality, which has been presided over by successive Westminster governments of whatever political hue, decade in and decade out?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the inequality gap in the UK is again one of the reasons why I think we need power over the levers of social and economic policy to try to deal with that. I've already spoken about the childcare proposal, which I think would have a huge effect over time on raising attainment and dealing with some of that inequality gap. We also set out proposals, for example, to ensure that the minimum wage rises at least in line with inflation. The tax credits and benefits rise at least in line with inflation. Why is that important? Because it stops the lowest paid in our society falling further and deeper into poverty. So there's a range of measures in here that not overnight, but over time, will address that inequality gap in Scotland and help to make our country not just wealthier but fairer as well. And it's that ambition for a wealthier and fairer country that drives everything in this White Paper and our support for that independence that we seek.
Patrick Harvie, followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you. I would love to fund a childcare revolution by scrapping the weapons of war instead of cutting other public services. But even if the Better Together parties don't share the desire for the freedom to make that choice, doesn't it show the depths to which they have sunk that they describe that proposal as a childcare bribe? Since when did any politician with any integrity describe public services in such a demeaning term?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I agree 100% with Patrick Harvie on that? I think it is a sign of where things have come to when we don't just have Conservative politicians describing public service policies like childcare, universal childcare in these terms, which perhaps doesn't come as a huge surprise, but we have Labour politicians queuing up to join them in doing so. The Better Together Labour-Tory alliance that wants to hold Scotland back. I'm proud to be part of a cross-party Yes campaign that wants to take Scotland forward to a better future.
Fiona MacLeod, followed by Duncan McNeill.
I'm sure the Deputy First Minister, like me, believes that Democrats across this chamber and around Scotland will be incredibly excited by the opportunity that independence gives Scotland to finally have a written constitution. given the historic and social significance of this, I wonder if I could ask the Deputy First Minister what thoughts have been given to make this a truly participative process with innovative forms of engagement techniques so that everyone can feel and be part of the process of writing this constitution.
Deputy First Minister.
Fiona MacLeod, I think, raises one of the genuinely exciting opportunities of being independent, the chance to have the opportunity to design a written constitution. We are one of the only countries, certainly in Europe and the world, that doesn't have a written constitution, setting out clearly the relationship between the citizen and the state, protecting our freedoms and our rights. We've been very clear as a government the kind of things we would want to see in that written constitution: social and economic rights, a ban on nuclear weapons, for example. But this is not a written constitution that should be written by the Scottish Government. It should be one that is written in a collaborative and participative way, and Part 4 of the White Paper sets out that process. But that will be a process that should be determined by the independent Scottish Parliament elected in 2016. And if we get that yes vote and become independent, certainly look forward to being part of, but only part of, that exciting process.
Duncan McNeill, followed by Jim Eadie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Only 12 days ago, Deputy First Minister, you said that shipbuilding was dear to your heart. Shipbuilding was vital to the Scottish economy. 170,000 words later, can the 35 words that refer to shipbuilding in any way at all match up to a new future or even a sustainable future? Where are the assurances and the guarantees for my constituents who work in Govan, Scotland and Rosyth that the industry will have a secure future in an independent Scotland?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, shipbuilding is very dear to my heart, which is why I always try to avoid taking any opportunity to use it as a political football. I actually think shipbuilding is more important than that. What this white paper does is two things. It sets out, in some detail when you go through the defence part of it, it sets out what the procurement requirements, initial procurement requirements will be for independent Scottish Defence Forces. It talks about something, frankly, that has been talked about far too little within the Westminster system: diversification in terms of defence and the shipbuilding industry. And of course, I will repeat what I've said previously. Post-independence, the Clyde will remain, as it is today, the best place to build the Type 26 frigates. Alistair Carmichael, I think, said, and I hope he's regretting saying this now, that Article 346 of the European Union Treaty somehow prevented the UK Government placing these contracts in the Clyde. He sat next to a Defence Minister at a House of Commons committee just a couple of weeks ago where the Defence Minister contradicted him and said there was nothing that prevented these contracts being placed on the Clyde. They will come to the Clyde because the Clyde is the best place with the best people and the best facilities to build them, and it would make sense, given the details set out in here, for that in future post-independence to be a joint procurement. And remember, joint procurement in the interest of cost effectiveness is what the UK Government goes on about all the time.
Jim Eadie, followed by Malcolm Chisholm.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Following a yes vote, what further steps will the Scottish Government take to realise Scotland's ambition to be an active and good global citizen?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, in the section of the document that deals with international relations and defence, it sets out in detail our commitments around international aid. Just as I believe we have a responsibility to the poorest in our own country, so too as a relatively rich country do we have a responsibility to the poorest around the world. So we've set out here our commitment to secure and ensure the 0.7% of GNI in terms of international aid and a range of other ways in which we would work with international partners to be that good global citizen, to help to tackle global poverty, climate change, build on the world-leading work this Parliament has already done around climate change, and the opportunities of independence in that are many and they are varied.
Malcolm Chisholm, followed by Margaret MacDonald.
Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's aspirations on childcare, although I would give more emphasis to 2-year-olds and do it now. But how could she deliver that? Or how could she deliver that or any of her other spending wishes with a neoliberal economic policy, higher interest rates and a hope for the best relationship with the rest of the UK? Does she not realise how absurd the Government looks when the White Paper says the Bank of England will be a lender of last resort? And does she not understand that even if there was a currency union, there would be no fiscal independence, contrary to what she said on the radio this morning. Is she not leading Project Wish against Project Reality, as will become increasingly clear over the months ahead?
Deputy First Minister. Order. Order.
I understand the vehemence with which Malcolm Chisholm makes his argument, because as somebody who has got the greatest of respect for Malcolm Chisholm, I've got a sneaky wee feeling he doesn't actually believe it in his heart of hearts. And actually, he'll be as inspired by this as I am. I don't know where the higher interest rates that were just chucked into that question came from. I think he's perhaps been reading the Project Fear playbook a little too much. Independence offers us the opportunity in Scotland to take the steps that get our economy growing, that create jobs, that creates the wealth for us then to share that wealth more equally and deal with the inequality that I know Malcolm Chisholm loathes as much as I do. And I tell you something, I haven't given up hope yet and will not give up hope before the 18th of September next year in getting Malcolm Chisholm onto the yes side of this debate, where his heart,
Margaret MacDonald, followed by Christina McKelvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I first of all congratulate the Government on producing what I think is a very workmanlike document. It's going to start many of the debates, I hope, that we should be having in Scotland. But can I also gently say that she shouldn't dismiss what Malcolm Chisholm has just said, because that's what a lot of us feel, that it looks too easy. Now, we know it's going to be difficult, and that's where you get to negotiations. And so when we're talking about negotiations, shouldn't we be thinking of tapping into all of the talent, all of the experience that there will be in Scotland after the yes vote? There are people who have been in the front benches of cabinets. There are people who have done the international negotiations. They're called Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling. I would leave out one or two others. But I quite seriously urge on the Government, think of the whole country, not just of the Scottish National Party.
Deputy First Minister.
I made a speech, I think, around about a year ago just now, where I set out very clearly that while, if we get a yes vote, this government, as the democratically elected government of Scotland, would lead the negotiations, we would do so as part of a Team Scotland approach. I would very much want to see people like Alistair Darling, Gordon Brown, Margaret MacDonald in those negotiations with us, making sure that all of us on Scotland's side get the best deal for Scotland that we possibly can. And that, I think, is a key point in this debate. We will have the yes-no debate, and we will have it passionately over these next few months, and we will be on opposite sides, those of us in this chamber. But the minute Scotland votes yes, we stop being on opposite sides. We're all on the same side, and it's on the same side that we then have the opportunity to take our country forward. So I agree 100% with the proposition that Margaret MacDonald has put forward.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. Given that women in Scotland need to worry just as much about the sticky floor than the glass ceiling, can I ask the Deputy First Minister what proposals are set out in the White Paper to increase female participation in the workforce, and what impact these proposals would have on the economy of an independent Scotland?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I've obviously spoken at some length today about the childcare proposal, which would do great things to help women participate in the workforce. We've also talked in here about what we would try to do to increase women's representation on company and public boards, and legislate for that if necessary, because one of the practical things that transfers from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament with independence, of course, is legal responsibility for equality issues, and that is one of the perhaps little things that won't get the headlines in this White Paper that I think is absolutely worth supporting.
Thank you. That ends the statement from the